Hello everyone, welcome to our review of Natsuki Chronicles by Qute, a very well-respected shmup developer we haven't talked too much about on the channel. They're famous, of course, for Judgment Silver Sword, Eschatos, Jinja Force, and now, of course, Natsuki Chronicles. I believe this is their latest shmup, and originally I think it was released on the Xbox One exclusively, but of course, not many shmup fans had an Xbox One. Not many people had an Xbox One for a really long time, especially the Japanese audience. Just imagine how many Xbox Ones were sold in Japan, like 10 of them. So I'm sure that idea of releasing it exclusively on the Xbox One probably didn't pan out sales-wise, and so they thought, okay, we got to get serious here. So they ended up bringing it to Steam, and now also here on the PS4. And I want to give a quick shout out to First Press Games. They hit me up and said, hey, do you want to review the PS4 physical version of the game? We'll just send it to you. I thought, all right, fine, send it to me. That way I don't have to buy this game anyway, so it's kind of a nice little setup there. Shout outs to them for hooking me up with it. I did get the physical copy, as you can see here. Very nice custom cover art and really nice sort of custom dust jacket, I guess you would call it. And then the case looks very clean, well made. The disc, I opened it up, make sure it wasn't any crazy stuff going on in there. They included an instruction manual. Everything was glossy, clean. I think if you're like a collector type person, this all is going to appeal to you. I'm not exactly unboxing therapy with this type of stuff, so you're not going to get those pornographic shots of me cutting the cellophane and all that sort of thing. But as far as a physical version of the game, no complaints here. Very polished and professional in my opinion. They also included this gold coin with the logo on the front and then First Press on the back. So I guess that's heads and tails. And for the life of me, I've been trying to figure out what to do with this thing. I'm not the collector type, as you can see from my background here. I don't display things like most YouTubers, so I have nowhere to put this sort of thing. So I've been trying to figure out a use for it. Do I carry it around in my pocket like Two-Face? Do I drill a hole in it and wear it around my neck like a medallion? Or is it a slammer that I use to play Pogs? I don't know, but it is kind of cool, and I guess if you're into coins and that sort of like little memorabilia, it does seem pretty nice. So overall, physical version seems pretty solid to me. And of course, I think if you want to get the physical version, I'm assuming this is your only method of doing it. Yeah, shout outs to them for hooking me up. Now, Natsuki Chronicles. I'm going to be honest, when I was first looking at the gameplay footage of this game, like many of the 3D Qte games, I thought like, it looks a little bit bland as far as the visuals. It's not really wowing me, not something that you watch trailers for or gameplay footage for and think, oh, I gotta get this, this must happen. But I do know that Qte are well regarded for their ability to make a quality game. So even if the visuals aren't exactly popping out and blowing your mind, the gameplay from this developer is always pretty damn solid. So I thought, okay, let's see how this goes. A horizontal shmup, I would not say it's a bullet hell necessarily. It has a little bit more bullet hell influence because it is a modern shmup, and all modern shmups have some degree of bullet hell influence in my opinion. But it's not like full-on rolling gunner, if that's kind of the impression you're wondering. It is still more along the lines of like an R-type or a Gradius. And in the instruction manual, there is like a little developer interview, and the developer said, yeah, Thunder Force, R-type, Gradius, the usual suspects, they were our inspirations here. But because Qte just have this real creative, innovative streak to them, they're not just going to make a clone. And actually, I think they came up with a lot of interesting ideas for the horizontal shmup that I sort of think might be worthwhile just becoming more standard across the board, even outside of this game. The first example of this, of course, that stands out is the red warning lasers that the enemies and enemy bullets generate. At first, I was thinking, oh, this is kind of cute. This is kind of like helping beginners understand how the game works and how to dodge. It's like a beginner type feature. That's what I thought at first. But then as I started playing the game, especially as the game gets more and more wild and difficult, I started to realize this laser warning system is actually brilliant design and something that I think should be adopted more widely among horizontal shmups and old school inspired shmups, and here is why. So one reason why I am not a big fan of classic style shmups, or I don't tend to play them that much, is because they are incredibly memorization heavy. And the main reason for that is the time between something happening and the time between you are alerted to something is about to happen is usually very short. So what I'm saying is an enemy spawns, fires, or an enemy pops up from the side of the screen, fires, or the formation comes in and you have to deal with it in a real quick manner. And the reason why they need to do that is because if stuff's moving too slow, if stuff's not coming out and surprising you, the game gets very boring and bland. But the result is that you typically have very memorization heavy shmups. Even stuff like UN Squadron that people would consider more along the beginner lines. Okay, the first time you play a level, you're gonna have ships spawning on top of you or popping out where you're not expecting them, or bullets are just gonna fly and hit you in the face. And this is just sort of the nature of the old school horizontal shmup up to this point. However, these warning lasers are actually a really interesting antidote to this problem, because what often happens in Natsuki Chronicles is, okay, there's going to be a ship that flies in and it's going to spawn this big ass pattern that's going to fly at you and destroy you in 0.3 seconds. But you get the warning laser first, before it's even on screen sometimes, before anything happens. So you know, okay, some shit's going to go down here. And what's really great about that is, rather than having to do this sort of trial and error, step-by-step learning process like you get in a lot of old school horizontal shmups, instead, what you can do is you can play more reactively, like a bullet hell. And so these warning lasers, I think, really open up the level design in a lot of interesting ways, because now the developers can start to play with this concept a little bit, or maybe they'll spawn a warning laser here, and then you're reacting to the warning laser, and you start having to both react to things in real time, like, okay, the bullet's flying at you, but then you have other bullets that are yet to be on the screen spawning warning lasers, and so you're starting to prioritize targets, you're starting to dodge things in the future before they happen. And this is something that I think is going to really help new players to the genre, because I've always said, when it comes to shmups, there's actually 3 dimensions of every shmup. There's the horizontal space, the vertical space, and then time. Time is the 3rd dimension because it's an auto scroller, and usually this is the hardest thing for players to pick up on and understand intuitively, because they're always reacting to the on-screen threat. They're never reacting to the future threat. But this warning laser system, I think, is a really good illustration of, okay, now you have to not only worry about the bullets flying at you now, but you have to understand the bullets that are yet to appear on screen. And so I think this is brilliant game design, and something I think should be standard in a lot of like these sort of fast-paced old school shmup. But being Qte, that was not enough for them. They also decided to do a lot of other stuff that people have been talking about. The big selling point for a lot of people that have talked to me about this game, that have recommended me the game, especially because I cover shmups that would be good introductions to the genre, is the story mode. So the game has a story mode and the game has an arcade mode. And the way the story mode works is, that's a little bit, you know, like, oh, is that some Euro shmup stuff right there? You know, something we all worry about. Is there RPG mechanics? I actually wouldn't really say it works that way. I would say it actually works a lot more like you're playing Ninja Gaiden, or you're playing a lot of character action games, where it's not an RPG, but as you progress through the game, you just upgrade. And yes, there's a money system and you can spend the money how you want, just like kind of like an RPG. But I would say it's actually still much more along the lines of character action, because what you're buying is your weapon set, and it progresses along as you go through. I do think it's very natural and cool, and sort of an interesting way to introduce the player to the weapon set of the game, because another challenging aspect of playing a lot of classic horizontal shmups, I'm thinking of you, Darius, is getting familiar with the weapon sets and getting familiar with what works where, why, how does this upgrade. And there's a lot going on in this game, where you've got the primary weapon, you've got the secondary weapon, and then you've got the shield type thing going on. So you've got a lot of choices and things to try and figure out. And when you jump right into arcade mode, it's like reading Greek symbols, trying to figure out what am I picking up here? What's this mean? What's that mean? The story mode, just in that sense, is very useful, because it teaches you exactly what power-ups do what, where, how you upgrade them, what they look like. So it sort of eases you into the game. One issue with the story mode, though, is in the arcade mode, you can swap the weapons on the fly as you react to the level design. So you'll be going through a level, and if there's a lot of corridors that you need to have piercing wave bullets for, you'll pick up the piercing wave bullet upgrade and use that. And then if you're coming at the boss, oh, maybe I'll use the laser. And so there's this weapon swapping designed to the arcade mode that I think is pretty critical But in the story mode, you're just kind of locked into your weapon set, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe there's some kind of crazy thing where you can swap your weapons. If not, it can kind of get you in a little bit of trouble because I don't know how well balanced the weapons in this game are. I think they're fairly well balanced, but there's some real stinkers. For example, there's a lot of the early stages where there's a lot of corridors that pretty much require you to have the piercing wave beam. But if you're going in story mode and you are a fool like I was and you selected the Vulcan bread shot thinking a spread shot, you know, that'd be useful. That does not pierce. It does not do a lot of damage. It's pretty crappy of a weapon, and so you're going to be having a rough time. And then it's like night and day. You switch to the piercing bullet, and all of a sudden you're just having no problem at all. You're able to kill stuff before they even threaten you. So I think the level design and weapon design balance sometimes kind of butt heads in story mode, and if you're kind of stubborn and you keep trying to clear stages with the wrong weapons, you're going to be driving yourself insane. That is one flaw with the story mode, but overall I do think it is an effective way to introduce yourself to the game without having it be full-on credit feeding, spamming like you'll get in arcade mode. Also, if you want to stage select, you have to play story mode, so there is that. From what I was able to come across, it doesn't seem like you can swap weapons in story mode, and so you can't really practice some of your arcade routes in story mode if you can't swap the weapons, right? So I think that's another drawback of story mode. There's also no boss checkpoints if you want to practice the boss. You gotta grind all the way through the level. Come on, Qute, you know better than that. Another aspect of story mode that kind of annoyed me is that, okay, so you're going through, you're playing story mode, you're unlocking all this stuff. One thing you can lock is the alternate ship colors. I thought, oh, that's really cool. That's really nice. That's something I always like to see in a shmup, alternate ship colors. You can't use them in arcade mode. What the hell? So you have to just play them in story mode only? That's the dumbest shit ever. So I think they should have had more of an integration between arcade mode and story mode. Like, you play story mode to unlock shit, and then you can actually use that shit in arcade mode, at least the ship colors. I mean, that's not going to affect any high scores. Or even like stage select or practice mode, shit like that. The story mode is kind of a cool idea, but I do think it isn't fully integrated with the arcade mode. And in the end, in my opinion, the arcade mode is the real mode of the game. And arcade mode has the weapon swapping meta. The power-up meta is just different between the modes. They are distinctive from one another. One of the things that I really liked about it, this is in the story mode as well, but it is in arcade mode, is the fact that you can choose the way the speed system of the game works. I saw this in Gradius when I covered that game, and I thought maybe that game came up with it. But now I'm thinking, okay, probably Natsuki Chronicles came up with this, which is basically, so you have your primary speed and then you have your secondary slow speed. Typically in a shmup, both of these are just determined by your ship type and by the developer. And if they want to be a little bit more flexible, like you'll see in R-Type, they'll have like a speed select or a speed shift, so you hit up, 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 you know, and you go faster. A lot of old school shmups have that. The problem with that is that I've always found that a little bit clunky, especially if you're trying to transition between full-on hyper speed and then slow methodical speed. That's usually really clunky mechanic. And so I really like the idea of having a secondary speed that you can sort of manually dial in, and then having your primary speed being able to manually dial in. I was watching a replay by Jamers, and he recommended if you're going for like the expert mode, you basically have to play at 9 speed because the game requires so much movement and the game gets hectic and crazy later on. But when I was playing just for comfort, I found that having 7 or 8 primary speed and then having 4 or 5 slow speed, I thought that was a really nice, comfortable sweet spot. And then in terms of the game's level design, it has a really generous, gentle difficulty curve. And I think a lot of newer shmup players are going to appreciate that, because one thing that I really appreciate about cave bullet hells, for example, is they have like a very steep and quick difficulty curve. Basically, they give you 2 stages to figure out, okay, this is kind of how the game works. And now, okay, now let's play stages 3, 4, and 5. That's when the game gets cooking. A lot of horizontal shmups have, I feel, very uneven level design, where it goes from like easy to crazy hard to easy again and then hard again, like all these weird spikes in difficulty. You'll even run into that in some of the R-Type games. But in this game, I think they did a fantastic job of this gentle, ever-increasing difficulty. You know, each stage is slightly harder than the other. And once you start hitting the back half, of the stages, the game starts getting absolutely wild and a lot of fun. And then the last thing I want to comment on is the health system of the game, because I think it is very accessible for newer players, but also for experienced players. I still think you're going to appreciate it because, again, it does address one of the more frustrating aspects of this style of shmup, the horizontal shmup, which is, okay, you're playing Gradius. You're playing it, maybe this is your first time getting to stage 4 or 5. You're doing well. You're fully powered up. You're blowing the shit out of stuff. You're feeling cool in control. And then something just kind of pops up and kills you. Just some random thing hits you, and then that's it. Game over. Go home, kid. That's very frustrating unless you have your force field on. So what this game is doing is it's trying to combat Gradius syndrome quite a bit. So you're getting a shield system, so when you take hits, you lose your shield, you lose your power up a bit, but you're not fully death checkpointed like in Gradius games. Also, you do have some reward for hanging in there and fighting it out. That's something, again, that old school shmups really struggle with, because in modern bullet hells, most of them don't have power-ups and that type of thing. So hanging in there and battling it out isn't necessarily that big of a deal in bullet hell, because you're always fully powered up pretty much. And when you're not in like a cave game, it's pretty easy to get powered up again. You know, power-ups and being low powered is not really part of the meta for most bullet hells. But in old school horizontal shmups, again, something that kind of drives me crazy about the game, that uphill climb is absolutely brutal, and at some points it's questionable whether it's better just to reset the game and redo it rather than trying to claw your way through these checkpoints and memorize all the little checkpoint meta and everything like that. Well, this game sort of seems to be thinking about this issue, and it came up with a pretty elegant solution, which is your shield will actually charge back up and recover. And what that does is it directly rewards being able to recover in a real way. So rather than having to just say, screw it, I'll just restart the game, now you know, okay, I'm in a tough situation here, but if I hang in it, I'm going to be able to recover and move forward with a little bit of extra mercy for the game, which I appreciate, because it can get really frustrating when you're doing super well and then all of a sudden it's over, time to hit restart. And so the sum total all of this, with the warning lasers, with the weapon system, with the gradual kind difficulty curve, with the charging shield system, is Qute is doing everything they can to blunt the edge of the horizontal classic shmup formula without getting rid of its main gameplay. So rather than dumbing down the gameplay, they're just adding in all these mechanics to sort of blunt that edge and reduce that frustration. And I actually think a lot of really innovative, cool ideas are brought to the table here. The two big ones, in my opinion, is the warning lasers and the recharging shield systems. I think these could be great innovations that I'd like to see in other shmups within the horizontal classic subgenre. So yeah, definitely recommend of the game. It seems to run perfectly solid on PS4, though I will say I have heard that the PC version can run at high frame rates. So I mean, come on. If you have the access to the PC version, that's probably the way to go, because the high frame rate, that's really, really cool. But if you're a console type person, or if you want the physical version, PS4 is a solid option as well. Thanks so much. Adios, everyone. So thank you to the $5 patrons: 100, Another Joe, Anthony A, Aaron Solis, Bo, Ben, Blur Reality, Borgie22, Brian Shiver, Chris Yusufovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Clammy Coyote, Cook Some Soup, Corey Mark, Des Audio, Darren Griffin, Disco Stas Leia, DJ420 Praise It, Eric H, FCK, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, J, Magellan6276, JLab, JBRPG, John Kelly, Gameboy Guru, K, K2, KZ, Khalil Reedy, Contain, Larridge, Malaise, Mark Toms, Matthew Derekish, Maz, Megadeth859, Minung, Macklin, Michael Stum, Mitchell Y, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Neon Dagger Games, Oakla Kugels, Psycho Blizzard, Rattlecat, Raoul, Real Skeen, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Sarah, Scanline City, Seesaw FW, 7 Overdose, Shmup Junkie, Sarah Pong, Steve Fiction, The Boot Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, TRM, Sugumo, Twilight EX, Unikoi Roots, Wabby Legs, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.